Hey guys, Taufik here. In this video, I will be solving 3 tricky SQL interview queries. Now, these are the kind of queries that you can expect in an SQL interview, whether you are applying for a beginner role or you're applying for an experienced role. These kind of queries may be expected in any SQL interview. Okay, now in this video I will be solving these SQL queries, and when I'm solving them I will explain you step-by-step approach and the logic that you can take to solve these kind of SQL queries. But before I can start, if you like these kind of videos where I'm solving some tricky SQL queries or complex SQL queries, then let me know in the comments below so I can make more such videos for you guys. Also, if you have any SQL queries which you find to be complex or tricky, or you found some SQL queries during any of your interviews, then you can share those SQL queries with me in my email, and if I find it interesting, I'll try to make a video about them. Okay, I'll leave my email ID in the description below, so definitely share any SQL queries that you find to be complex or tricky with me. Okay. Finally, if you would like to learn more about SQL or Python or data analytics concepts, then definitely consider subscribing. Thank you, and let's begin. Okay, so these are the 3 SQL queries that we will be solving in this video. The first one is the print meaningful comment. So let's start by just looking at the first question. Now I have this question mentioned here, and I'm going to show you what is the input and what is the expected output and the data set before we can actually solve this query. Now this query states, write an SQL query to display the correct message or meaningful message from the input, comments and translation table. Okay, meaning that we have an input table, that is comments and translation table, and this table looks something like this. So it has, I think, 3 different columns. So there is an ID column, there is a comments column and a translation column, and you can see for some of the comments we have like very good, good, bad, ordinary, and then this looks like some garbage value, and then there is excellent, then again some garbage value, satisfied, again garbage value, and finally also some garbage value. Okay, now what we are expected to do is we need to write a query which is going to fetch data from this particular input table and derive an output which would look something like this. Okay, so what this is showing is, this is only showing meaningful comments. Okay, so all the garbage values that you have seen here has been replaced by what was mentioned in the translation column. Okay, so it's kind of, you should process the comments. As soon as you find some garbage comments, you need to go to the translation table and translation column and then fetch the correct or meaningful comments. Okay, so this is the query that you need to write. Now, as soon as you look at this question, right, you kind of start thinking, is there any assumption that we need to make? Because how do we know that there is a garbage value or an incorrect comment? There has to be some flag, right? If there was a flag, that would be like, the flag would be Y or 1 or whatever, right? To indicate that this particular row has garbage value, then for that particular row we would take or replace the comment with a translation value, right? But you can see at this table there is no flag, there is no assumption that has been given, right? So just by looking at this, how do we solve this problem? Now the solution to this problem is very simple, but the way how this question is posted, this is where it can kind of become confusing. Okay, so if you look at the question, they're telling write a query to display the correct message or meaningful message from the input table. Okay, so if you just look at this for 1 minute or 2 minutes, you will see that the answer is straight in front of us. Okay, we don't need to find an assumption, we don't need a flag column. Simply what we need to do is we can just analyze this table and we can see that wherever the comment is proper, that is very good, good, bad, ordinary or excellent, satisfied, etc., right? For all of these correct comments, there is no translation given. The translation is null. Okay, so the translation is only present when there is a garbage value in the comments column, right? So just by understanding this logic, we can very easily solve this problem. So what we just need to do is we need to write a query where we only print the comments, but when we're printing the comments, we also need to check the translation column, such that if the translation column is null, we print or we display whatever is present in the comments column for that record, but wherever translation column is present, we fetch the data from the translation column, right? So let's see how we can solve them. Okay, so I'll just go to my PostgreSQL database. I'm going to solve them in PostgreSQL, but of course you can solve this in any database. Now all the data sets and inputs and everything, right, will be mentioned in my blog. So I'll leave the link to my blog in the description below. So if you want to take the data set and try to execute the query yourself, you can just go to my blog, download the data set, and then just copy those data sets into your database and then write the SQL queries. Okay, now I have already created the tables, and the table name in this case is, I think, comments and translation probably. So I think it is translations. Yeah, so I have this table. You can see it's having 10 records, right? Now, if I had to just solve this, it's actually pretty simple. What I just need to do is, I can see that my output only has one column. So I am not bothered about all the other columns. I just need one column which is going to be named as output, right? So I can solve it in many different ways. Now, one of the easiest ways to solve this is just by using a case statement. So I can just tell case when, okay, and I can just tell like translation is null. Okay, so if the translation column is null, then I want to fetch from the comments, then I want to print comment. Okay, else I want to print the translation column value itself. Okay, and I'll do an end, and then finally I'll give a name for this like output. Okay, so that's all. So if I just move this to the next line just to explain this better, you can see that. Okay, so you can see that when the translation is null, I will fetch the comment column value, and when the translation is not null, that means it has any value, then it will fetch the value from the translation column itself. So now if I execute this, you can see that I'm getting the expected output. So I'm getting very good, good, bad, ordinary, very bad, excellent, not satisfied, satisfied, extraordinary, and medium. So all these are meaningful values. So what happened was, wherever there were garbage values, these garbage values got replaced with the values that was mentioned in the translation column. Okay, I hope this is clear, and this is pretty simple, right? The solution is pretty simple, just that understanding the data, and when you look at this for the first time, it might seem that the question is missing something, but if you have a hard look at that question and the data, you will realize that the solution is right in front of you, and basically this is how you can solve this. Now I can also solve this problem in another way by using some inbuilt function. So I'm going to show that as well. So let's say I can use a function like coalesce. So coalesce, you can also use any other functions in your RDBMS, like I think in Oracle you can use NVL, and I think in other RDBMS you have some other functions as well. I'll just use coalesce. What I'm going to do is, so looking at this data, right, if this is null, then I want to fetch comment. So if translation is null, I want to fetch comment, but if translation is present, I just want to fetch what is present in a translation column. So I can just pass here like translation and comma comment. So that's all, and this will be my output, right? So output, what is happening, what coalesce will do is, if the first argument is null, then it's going to fetch the value from the second argument, right? If the first argument has some value, then it's going to return that value itself. Now if I execute, you can see that the output is exactly the same. So I can solve this problem either using case or using coalesce, or if you have any other inbuilt function which is similar to coalesce, you can solve it using that as well. Okay, so this was the first tricky question. The solution is simple, but understanding the data is where it's a little tricky. Okay, I hope you understood this. Okay, so now let's move on to the second question. And if I come back to my Notion here, and if I go to the second question states, derive the desired output. Okay, so looks like we need to look at the input table and then derive the output query. So let's read the question. The question statement states, using the source and the target table, write a query to arrive at the output table as shown below. So, and they are telling there is a condition that we need to follow. Provide the solution without using subqueries. So we need to solve this problem without using subqueries. Okay, so the problem is there is two tables. There is a source table and a target table. Both these tables are having two columns each, as you can see here. And you can see that the ID column has basically these two tables are having 4 records itself, and the ID column has 1, 2, 3 and 4 in the source table, and the name is ABCD. But in the target table, the ID column has 1, 2, 4 and 5. So looks like 3 is missing in the target, but 5 is additionally added to the target, right? And then you have the name column here as well. Now what we need to do is we need to write a query where we'll be using the data from these two tables and then somehow arrive at something that is mentioned in the output here. Okay, so our output should have basically 3 records. The first record should basically print any record that is only present in the source table but not present in the target table. Okay, and we should print the ID and then a hard-coded message saying that this is new in source. And then the second record is basically printing 5 and new in target. Looks like this 5 is the additional record present in the target table, but it is not present in the source table. Okay, and then finally we have 4, and which is mentioned the comment as mismatch. This looks like a record which basically this is an ID which is present in both the tables, the source and target, but the name that is corresponding to this ID is different in the source and target, because in the source 4 is corresponding to the name D, but in the target 4 is corresponding to the name X. So there is a mismatch in the name, right? And that is why it's printed as mismatch. Now I can pretty easily solve this question using subqueries, but here specifically it's mentioned that we need to solve this problem using without subqueries. And you can expect this kind of question. The interviewer would know that solving a particular problem using a particular concept would be very easy, and they would want to test how much you know about all the other concepts in SQL. Okay, and that is why you might expect this kind of questions with this kind of some rules. Okay, so let's see how we can solve them. So I'll just go back to my PostgreSQL, and I think I already have created these two tables. So I have the source table and then I have the target table. So I'm just going to query this table first. So let's say in my source table I have 4 records, 1, 2, 3, 4, and with some names. And then my target table again I have 1, 2, 4, and 5, and with some names. Okay, now before I can solve this problem, let's look at the data set. Let's look at the input and let's try to understand what is the logic that we can apply to solve this problem. So let's try to solve this problem step by step. So just by looking at this problem, right, I can see that I basically looks like I need to write 3 different queries. Why? Because the first record in this output is 3, which is new in source, and this 3 is only present in my source table but not present in my target table. So somehow I need to write a query where I will probably have to join these 2 tables, and I only have to fetch the record which is only present in the source table but not in the target table. Okay, so it looks like a left join would be a pretty good concept that we can use here, right? Because what left join does is left join will basically do 2 things, right? A left join will first do an inner join, and then additionally it will go to the leftmost table and see if there are any additional records in the left table which is not present in the right table, and we should capture that particular record, right? So let's see how to do that. But before we fetch this record number 1 with ID 3 and with the record number 2 with ID 5, let's try to write a query to find this the last record, that is with the ID 4. Okay, so this is pretty simple, right? We just need to fetch the record which has ID 4 and which has basically whose names are different. Okay, so what I can do is I can join these 2 tables based on ID, but when I do a join based on ID, it will basically match all the matching records where ID is present in both the tables. So 1, 2, and 4 are basically the IDs present in both the table, it will get fetched. But then I can put an additional condition telling that where the names are not matching. Okay, so when I put that condition, hopefully I should get the record that I want. So let's see how to do that. So what I'm just going to do is I'll just tell I'll remove this. So I'll just tell select from source. I'll give alias like yes. I'll do an inner join and I'll join it with the target table, give an alias like t, and I'll mention my join condition like t.id equal to s.id, and this is fine. So if let's say if I execute this, right, I'll do s dot, or maybe let's say I will do s.id. Right, so if I execute this, you can see I'm getting all the IDs which are present in both the tables, but I only want to fetch the ID which is present in both the tables but whose names are different, right? So that is why I'll put an additional condition here saying that yes dot name not equal to t dot name, right? Hopefully with this it should only fetch me the ID 4, because you see ID 4 is having the name as D in source, and the same ID 4 in target table has the name as X. So this is exactly what we want, and we have to print this ID 4 with a comment like mismatch. Okay, and you can see that this comment value that is mentioned here is not present in both our tables, right? So looks like this is something that we will need to hard code. So let's just hard code this value here, and I can just tell mismatch, and I'm going to give an alias for this column like let's say comment, right? So if I execute this, now I think I have got the output. So I'm getting 4 and mismatch, and this is exactly what I wanted as my last record in my output. Okay, so we have finished one part of the query. Now we need to write the other 2 part of the query to fetch this 3 and 5. Okay, now we cannot use subqueries, right? So how do we do this? And I told you probably we can use left join to solve this. So let's try to fetch this record which is only present in the source table, that is our leftmost table. Okay, so what I'm just going to do is I'm going to write another query. So I'll just write select from source. I'll give alias like yes, and here I'll do a left join. Okay, left join with the target table given alias like t, and I'm again going to join them with id. So I'll just say t dot id equal to yes dot id, and I think that's all. And here if I just do s dot star, okay, or basically let me do a complete star, and if I execute this, you can see that since I'm doing a join on id, all the IDs which are, and since I'm doing a left join, it will fetch all the records which are present in the left table. So in this case, the leftmost table is my source table and target is my right table, right? And you can see from the leftmost table, every record is fetched. So 1, 2 and 3, 4. Now the reason why 1, 2 and 4 is fetched is because it's the result of an inner join, because these are the record that is present in both the left table and the right table. Okay. Now if you want to know more about joins, left join, right join and all sort of joins, I have made a couple of videos about joins. So definitely watch that video to get complete understanding of that. I'll try to leave the link to that video somewhere here, or you can find it in the description below. Okay. So with that understanding of left join, we can see that 1, 2 and 4 is coming due to the matching records present in both the tables, but this record 3 is basically showing up because this is coming from the leftmost table. So a left join will always fetch any additional record which is present in the leftmost table but may not be present in the rightmost table. Okay, and that is why it's fetching 3. And when SQL is doing this, when SQL is doing a left join where it is fetching the record from the leftmost table which is not present in the rightmost table, any column that you try to fetch from the rightmost table, it will return those columns with a null value. Okay, and that is why it's happening here. You can see these columns ID and name, right? So if I just say basically it's s dot star comma t dot star. Okay, just for okay, so I'm not going to write the exact names, but you can understand that these two columns, the first two columns are returning from S table and the last two columns are returning from the T table. Okay, that is my target table. So here this record number 3 is having value because this is coming from the leftmost table, whereas the same two columns in the rightmost table is returned as null because these records are not present in my right table. Okay, so we can just use this logic to fetch that exact record that we want. Okay, so let's say here if I put a where condition saying that where I'll tell t dot id is null. Okay, so what I'm doing when I'm telling t dot id is null, it should only fetch me this record because we are only interested in the record where it is present only in the left table but not in the right table. So if I execute this now you can see it's only returning me 3 and exactly what I wanted. I wanted it to return 3. Okay, but here I want to print a comment like new in source. So instead of printing all the columns, I'll just tell s.id and here I will just tell new in source and I'm going to give a column name for this like comment. Right, so now if I execute this, now you can see I'm getting this output that is 3 and it's telling the comment as new in source, exactly what I wanted in my output. Okay, so this is the second part of the query that we have done. Now let's go on to the last part of the query where we want to fetch any additional record present in the rightmost table but not present in the leftmost table. So how we can do that is, if you have understood left join query, then I think the next concept, the next part of this query is again going to be pretty similar. What we just need to do is, previously we fetched all the records which were only present in the left table. Now we need to fetch only records which are present only in the rightmost table. So instead of using left join, I'll just use a right join here. Okay, and here I'll tell new in target, right? And here I'll join with the same column, but here I will tell not t.id is null because in this case what happens is, okay, maybe just to explain or show this properly, right? I'll just do a star and if I, yeah, so I'll not execute that where clause. So let's say I'll just comment out this for now just to explain this. So if I run this, now you can see 1, 2 and 4 are present in both the tables, but this ID with record 5 is only present in the rightmost table, that is in the target table, but not present in the leftmost table. Okay, so this is exactly what I told you. A right join will first do an inner join and then it will go to the rightmost table and fetch any additional records which are present in the rightmost table but not present in the leftmost table. But when doing so, if you fetch any record from the leftmost table for the records which are only present in the rightmost table, then those columns will be returned as null. Okay, and that is why this is returned as null, and we will just capture this null value to fetch the exact record that we want for our particular problem now, right? So what I can just do is I can put a where condition saying that where s.id is null, so it should only fetch me this record, that is the last record here, which has id as 5. Okay, and here I'm just going to print t.id. So if I execute this, you can see it's returning me 5, and that is exactly what I wanted. Okay, and here I'm just going to add a comment saying that this is new in target, and this will be column alias as comment. Okay, so I think I have got this. Now that's all, guys. So this is basically how we solve this. Now what we need to do is we just need to join all of these queries together. So whenever you want to join the results of multiple queries together, we can just use the union operator. In this case, I'll use union operator, but if you use union all also, it's not going to make any difference. But since I do not want to find the distinct values, I'll just use union. Okay, so here I'll just tell union, and here as well I'll just tell union. And now if I execute this whole query, you can see I'm getting the expected output 3, 5 and 4 with the proper comments. This is exactly what I wanted. Okay, so I hope you understood this problem. So whenever you see this kind of a problem, and if you do not have to use subqueries, remember you can still try to solve these problems just by using the concept of left join or right join. Okay, I hope this is clear. Okay, so now let's try to solve the last problem in this particular video. That is this one, the query number 3, and it is named as IPL matches. Now this is kind of a popular question. A lot of subscribers have asked me this question. Also in my current live training that I'm giving on SQL queries, I think someone asked me this question. So I'm going to solve them here. So let's read the question first. It states that there are 10 IPL teams. Now, if you are not sure of what IPL is, it's basically a cricket tournament where I think in this year there are 10 different cricket teams will be playing against each other. Now, you can also consider any football tournament or any other tournament where there are multiple teams. Okay, so for this example, let's say we have 10 IPL teams. Write a SQL query such that each team will play with every other team just once. Okay, so I hope you understood this. What they are telling is there are 10 IPL teams. We need to write a query where it's going to return basically all the matches that each team will play. So each team needs to play the other team just once. Okay, if there are 10 teams, so each team should play 9 other teams, and that is it should play just once. Okay, and they're also telling you need to write another query where another query such that each team plays with every other team twice. Okay, so we kind of need to write two queries. Once we need to write a query where each team will play with every other team just once, and then we need to write another query where each team will play with every other team twice. Okay, so let's look at the input data first to better understand this. So this is like how the input table looks like. So we have a team code. So if I just okay, so we have a team code and a team name, and then you have all the team codes, and then we have the team name. So there are 10 different teams here. Okay, so this is the input table, and then the expected output is what they are telling is we need to have a column team and then the opponent team. So let's say we have a team Chennai Super Kings. This team is basically playing with every other team. So every other team from that tournament, but just once. Okay, and the same thing should repeat for every other team. Now I'm not showing the entire output here because it's a lot of lines, but I hope you get the idea of what is expected, right? So let's see how to solve them. So let me go back to my PostgreSQL, and here I already have created that table. So I will just execute that input table. So that is this table, select star from teams. And you can see that I have 10 records here. Okay, so how do I solve this problem? Now, before I can solve this problem, right, let's try to understand how we can solve this. So this is a very good problem for you to understand one particular concept of SQL. Okay, I'm going to talk about that. Now, what we need to do is I have this team. So let's call this team RCB, right? So I want this RCB to play with every other team. So when I say play, I just need to write a query where I need to match this record, so the first record, with every other 9 records, right? So that is my first iteration, and when I do my second iteration, I want to match this Mumbai Indians with every other record below this, right? But I do not want to compare Mumbai Indians again with RCB because already RCB has played with Mumbai Indians, so again Mumbai Indians should not be playing with RCB. Okay, now Just by looking at this, whenever you have a requirement where you want to compare one record of a table with every other record of that same table, this is a fantastic case where you should be using a self join. Okay, so let's try to write a self join and see what happens. So if I just do a self join, so in order to do a self join, I can just tell I need to join the table to itself, right? So whenever you're using a self join, right, it's always important that you give proper alias to represent what that table represents. Okay, so here I'm just going to say this is going to be my team. Okay, this will be just my team, and here I'm going to join it with again the same table teams, but this time I'm going to name this like opponent. Okay, and I'm going to do a join. So how do I do a join? So basically I cannot do an equi join here, right? I cannot join a team name to some other team name, right? What I need to do is I need to basically match every record from this table with every other record from that table. So I should not match it with kind of that same record, right? So the first thing generally what anyone would do is you would say that team dot team name not equal to opponent dot team name, right? And here I'll just print team dot team name as team, and here I will just tell opponent dot team name as opponent. Okay, so if I execute this, now you can see I'm getting the output, and if I look at the number of records, I think I'm getting 90 records. Now this is not actually right, because here the problem is, if you look at the data, right, you can see I have Royal Challengers Bangalore playing against Mumbai Indians. That is okay, fine. But then if you go down here, the record number 10, you can see Mumbai Indians is again playing against Royal Challengers Bangalore. I do not want this to happen. This is so even though the teams are represented in different columns, they are still playing against each other, right? My requirement was that every team should play with every other team just once, right? So this is kind of repeated. So here the team is actually playing with other team twice. Okay, I do not want this to happen. So how do I solve this? Okay, now in order to solve this, I can actually solve it straight away here, but I'm going to make it a little simpler, and hopefully it will be easier for you to understand. Okay, so what I'm going to do is maybe I'll remove all of this. So first thing I will do is, since in this table there are only two columns, there is no way that I need to find, basically there is no way for me to compare it with anything else, right? I have to only compare it with based on the team names or the team code. But to make it simpler, right, I'm going to manually create an ID for each of these teams. Okay, so let's see how to do that, and I'm going to explain you why we need that ID. Okay, it's not mandatory, we can solve it in many other ways as well, but I'm just trying to make it as simple as possible. Okay, so if I execute this, okay, teams, select start from teams, there is no other column other than the team code and the team name, right? What I want is I want to create an ID for each team, a unique ID for each team. So what I'll just do here is I'm just going to give an alias for this, like let's say T, and here I will just tell row number. So for every record I'm going to create a unique ID. I'll use a window function row number. I'll use the over clause here, and here I'll just order by, let's say maybe team name. Okay, and I'm going to give an alias for this, like let's say ID. Okay, and then I'll fetch all the other two columns, so that is team code and team name, right? If I execute this, now what is happening is I have basically created a new column here, ID. Okay, and it's having a unique ID for each team, right? So that is the first part. Now this is fine, and you might be thinking, why do we need ID? You will understand this when we go next. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'll be using this table. So basically, since I want to do a self join, I will use this entire query to do the self join. Okay, so instead of using this query multiple times, what I'll just do is I'll use a with clause here. Okay, so I'm just going to say with clause, and I'm going to call this, like let's say maybe matches. Okay, so with matches here, and I'll just move this to the right, and that's all. And here I'll just tell, okay, for now let's do select star from matches, and you can see it's the same output. Okay, so I've just put this whole query into my with clause. Now since I want to do a self join, why? Because I want to compare each record of this table with every other record from the other table, right? But making sure that I don't repeat teams. So let's see how to do that. The first thing is I need to join this table to itself. So here I'll just call this like yum1, or maybe I'll just call this like let's say team. Okay, and I'm going to join it with itself, and this time I'm going to call the second table like opponent. Okay, it's very important when you're doing a self join to give meaningful alias so that you kind of better understand what you're doing. Okay, now in order to do the join, I'm just going to say team dot what is it. So now I will not be using the team name or the team code, but I can simply use the ID because I created an ID above here in my with clause, right? So let's try to use this ID column to fetch the proper records. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'll be using the ID column. So I'll say team.id, and how do I basically join? So can I just tell team.id equal to opponent.id? This will not work, right? Because if I do this, what happens is the same team will just get compared to itself. This is not going to return the correct output. So let's see what happens. If I execute this, you can see that it's just returning me 10 records. This is not what I want, right? So it definitely cannot be equal to. But what I can do is I can do a symbol. Basically, I can join, or basically this is like kind of a non-equi join where I'm joining the two tables, not using the equal to symbol, but by using the less than symbol here. What this will do is, so for example, right, I'm going to explain this in detail, but before that, let me just execute this. So let me fetch the proper columns here first. So I'm just going to say team.team name as team, and here I'm just going to say opponent.team name as opponent. Right. So now if I execute this, you can see I'm getting team and opponent. And if I look at the number of records, it's just returning me 45. Okay. And if I carefully look here, I'm not repeating the matches. So every team is playing with every other team just once. Okay. Now, if you are looking this for the first time, you might think just by using this less than, how did it actually solve the problem? So for that, I'm going to explain that using an Excel. Okay, so let me go to my Excel and let me open my Excel. Okay, so I have this Excel file open here. So basically what I have done is I have just copied that same team table data twice. So this is kind of my team table and this is my opponent table. Now, I just want to tell you how does this non-equi join or this less than symbol actually fetch the correct data. Okay, so when SQL will process the record, you can see here I'm joining the teams, basically the same table, the same teams table to itself, right? So my teams table is having these three columns because I manually created its ID column. So when a table gets joined with another table in SQL, how SQL will process the record is, it's going to fetch the first record from the first table. So it's going to fetch this particular record and it's going to match this record with every other record in this table based on the condition. Okay. Now my condition tells that I just need to match that record where the ID from team 1 is less than the ID from opponent. So team 1, basically this is my team ID less than my opponent ID. Right. So here what's happening is this first record is having CSK. It's going to compare it with all the 10 records here. But first it will try to compare it with this first record. Here the ID is 1. So 1 is not less than 1, right? So this record will get skipped. Okay, this will get skipped. Then it will go to the second record. In the second record, so this 1 is less than 2. So because we are currently processing this record. So let me just maybe mark this as in yellow. Okay. And so here we are processing this record with every other record from the opponent table. So this record gets skipped because 1 is equal to 1. So 1 is not less than 1. But when it comes to the second record, 1 is less than 2, right? So this condition will hold true. So this record will get processed. Okay, so this will get processed. Okay, or you can tell passed or whatever, right? And the same thing when I process the third record, 1 is less than 3. So this also will get processed. So I'm just going to say P. Okay. So this is basically what will happen for every other record here. Okay. So every record will get processed, and that is why this CSK team will end up having a match with all the other 9 teams. Okay. So this is the first part. Now again SQL will go back to the teams table. It will start processing this record. Okay. That is this one. So here I'm just going to maybe make it blue. Okay. This DC team. Right, or maybe I will just make it, let's say here something else, orange. Okay, so what happens is this record again will get processed with every other record from the opponent table. In this case, first thing it will try to compare with the record number 1, which is having the ID as 1. So here 2 is less than 1, so this will get skipped, right? So this one here, maybe I'll just move this here. Okay, so this is for CSK, and now we are trying to compare with DC, right? So for DC, 1 is less than, DC is ID is having 2. So 2 is less than 1 is actually false. So this should get skipped, right? Because I'm having ID as 2 in my team table and the ID in opponent is 1. So is 2 less than 1? No, right? 2 is greater than 1. So 2 less than 1, this condition will become false, and that is why this record will get skipped. Now, this same DC record will get processed with the second record here. In this case, 2 is less than 2. This is what SQL will check, but again 2 is not less than 2. So again this will get skipped, right? Then it will try to process the third record, this one. So 2, is it less than 3? Yes, 2 is less than 3. So this will get processed, right? So this will get processed. And when it will come to the fourth record, it will check 2 is less than 4. Again, it is true. So this one also will get processed, right? And this is what will happen again, okay? So again, when it comes to the third record, it will compare with the first 3. It will not get processed. It will only start processing from the fourth record, okay? So this is how the less than symbol will try to fetch only, it will basically match with only those records which have not been compared previously, okay? If it was already previously compared, that means a join must have happened, so it will not repeat that record, okay? I hope you get the understanding of this. It's a little difficult to explain, but I hope you get the concept. So if I just do a join using this less than symbol, I should be able to get the record where every team is playing with each other just once, okay? I'm getting just 45 records, and this means there are 10 teams, each team playing 9 matches. So 10 into 9 is 90, but in each match you will have 2 teams, right? So it should be divided by 2. So it's 45, and this is the exact correct records. Now this is fine, but the second part of our query was telling that we need to also write another query such that each team plays with other team twice, okay? How we can do that is pretty simple, right? Like what we already did previously. So if I just copy the same query down here, and let's say here, instead of doing a less than the opponent team ID, I can just put not equal to. When it is not equal to, what it will do is it will match every team with every other team, irrespective whether that team has already played with the current team or not, okay? So when I execute this, here you can see it's going to return me 90 records. So this is basically, you can see here you can see Chennai Super Kings has played with Delhi Daredevils, but again Delhi Capitals is again playing with Chennai Super Kings again, okay? So every team will have 2 matches by using this query. I hope you understood, okay? Now it's not mandatory to use this ID. I'm using this ID because it was easier for me to explain. Without using ID, if you straight away use the team name to do this join, even then you will get the same output, okay? So I hope you understood, and I hope this was useful in some way. If you did, then leave a comment below with what you thought, okay? And if you have any SQL queries, complex or tricky queries, you can share them on my email ID. And finally, if you have not subscribed, definitely consider subscribing. Thank you for watching, and see you soon in the next one. Bye.